When I found out I had to make a piece of writing about my art and my process of making, I nearly shit my pants. I was going to be discovered as a complete and utter fraud. In truth, I don't have a cool process for curating my work. Sometimes I do a lot of research and I info dump to my friends and teachers in the form of a proposal that probably resembles the prophetic cultist speaking in tongues. But most of the time I listen to music and I think to myself, hey, that'd be pretty cool to make. But then I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. In the words of someone on the internet, I was an atheist until I saw Jesus in my living room. Except the living room was my bed, and Jesus was a Google Doc giving prompts for this art talk. The prompt in question is, did you have any epiphany moments this year? In order to really set the stage of this epiphany, we have to start from the beginning. About 3.7 billion years ago is when we can trace the oldest living organisms to on Earth. But enough about my friend's dad. The beginning in question was the start of my academic life, middle school. As someone who was talented in the arts, I had always assumed that must mean I was terrible at STEM and sports. Most media targeted towards teens or preteens were about the sporty kids, or the arts kids, or the kids that were really good at math. There was very few representation of people who liked to draw as well as play a sport, or maybe they were also an athlete. I sadly do not defy the stereotype of art kids being bad at sports and STEM. I have 2 left feet and could not tell you anything about a tight end other than that I think the name is quite dubious. I was never great at math, and my highest mark in science was a 62. I was happy that way because that's how it was supposed to be. I was an artist, and that's all that I could be. And then one day, I went to a magical place called the Etobicoke School of the Arts. Finally, a place that is curated to exactly what I am good at. I thrived in my art classes, surrounded by friends, and I continued to suck at math and sports. Then came something new. Previously, my self-worth was decided by the quality of my art, but high school was the start of me equating my self-worth to the height of my grades, and somehow, I got high 90s in geography and science. Now, I'm not trying to brag, I am bragging, but in all seriousness, my entire life had been cementing my belief that art was the only thing that I could ever and would ever be good at. Why was I suddenly doing better in science than I was in art? I decided it was a fluke. A one-off event like the presidents of the United States having illustrious love affairs or the Catholic Church embezzling money. Then grade 10 started. I continued to be subpar at mathematics despite having my desk so close to the front, I could hear my teacher's thoughts of quitting. In that year, I questioned whether or not I wanted to be in art school as I traversed the worst spout of art block I had ever experienced. I made pieces that even I didn't like about depressing childhood memories because that seemed to be the only thing that my teachers wanted. And those projects left me morose and like something was missing. That year, I got an 86 in science. Finally, grade 11 started, and my first semester can only really be accurately described as the 7th circle of hell. Violence. I had apps, functions, chemistry, and art. My teachers were all wonderful, and I got to live out the perks of being a wallflower dreams when my math teacher gave me the copy of her book, Flatland, to read. That book was awesome, but I still sucked at math. Apps was so interesting, and I loved learning about cults, hominins, psychological studies, breaching experiments, cults, sociologists, and cults. Did I mention I enjoyed learning about cults? In the words of Shane Madej, we're here for the cult stuff. Art became easier as I let loose and just made things that I wanted. The contents not being confined to a prompt or the crushing claws of childhood trauma, but simply how far I could stretch my imagination. Chemistry was interesting, and I loved the subject, but on my first test, the score I got back was devastating. I was right all along. I can't be good at art and and STEM. And I accepted the fact that even though I loved the subject, I just wasn't made to take sciences. Eventually, I got myself out of my puddle of wallowing in self-pity and studied really hard so that I could get a good mark in that class. And you know what? I did. But I only got an 81. Now, please don't get me wrong, that's a fantastic mark, but for someone whose self-worth derives specifically from their marks and academic validation, it was a small slap in the face. What made the situation worse was that I, once again, was not happy with the work I was making for art. But this time, it wasn't the content of my work, but because I realized that all of my love and passion I used to put into my art was being used up in science. I love both of these fields so much, but as they're both so demanding, by throwing myself fully in one, I was sacrificing the other. As the second semester started and I sat down in my biology class, I got ready to face the music that would be the soundtrack to my inevitably tremendous failure. But that failure never came. I thrived, and I have loved everything about it. I emerged from my chrysalis no longer an art-centric caterpillar, but instead an incredibly nerdy butterfly. As I continued to rise in my biology class, my art mark began to slump. Once again, the scales tipped and refused to stay balanced. And ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that was my epiphany. Every time I thrived in one place, I plummeted in the other because I cannot split my energy. Because being raised as the art kid, only ever paying attention to the path that people said I would go on, I never thought I would do anything else. And now, my unstoppable force has met the immovable object. I realized for the first time in my life, simply doing what I'm good at was not enough. I seem to be putting all of my love and energy into one thing, and I have very little left for the others. This is not sustainable, this back and forth, but at least then I'm special and talented and meant to be somewhere. I traded one stereotype for another because that's all I know how to be. And to be completely honest with you, I wish I was back as the dumb art kid. I miss not having to worry about being great at all that I do. Even though I still hold a deep love for creating, I don't think I'll ever love it the way 10-year-old me did, at least not for a while.